This is the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. How you doing, Rob? How you doing, buddy? Everything good over there? All right, that's my engineer, Rob Barretts. I love him. Love him, love him. Did you know this is the last show for February? Yes, it is. See ya, February. Bye-bye. Oh, take your icy, snowy, cold with you and bring on spring, man. It can't come soon enough. What a wacky winter. It's not like we had a lot of snow in the Northeast this winter, but we had snow, ice, rain, temperatures below zero, temperatures in the 50s, temperatures in the 60s, then back down into the 10s and the 20s and the teens. It's crazy. I can't stand it. Come on in, March. Come on in. Bring it on, baby. I am ready. Well, we've got some imagination to start you off with tonight. You ready? Imagine 40 years from now. The rich live in the cities. They have everything. The poor are outcasts living in poverty on the outskirts. They form an army to take their cities back. This is the story of The Boys from Bakersfield, written by Mitch Larrett. So, about these boys who become leaders.
These two boys that are the main characters, they are recruited to join this army that has the intention of overthrowing the corrupt leaders of this futuristic government. And throughout the story, they face many hardships. There's many huge battles that they're involved in which they have to kind of throw their morals out the door, and out of desperation, they have to fight for themselves and also fight for other people. And they're actually fighting for the millions of people in this future that are in the same situation they are, which is they have no technology, they have no resources. So not only are they fighting for themselves to gain back some of these rights, but they're also fighting for these millions of other people. I don't want to give anything away, but for those who are interested in The Boys from Bakersfield, it's something that it takes place over a few years, and pretty much everything is laid out on the line. It leaves you asking yourself questions at the end of it, but I'm not sure that after the story there's anything to be really taken further, if that makes any sense.
Okay, so it has a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Correct. There is actually 3 parts to it. It takes place over a few years. So the main characters, they start out as teenagers, and by the end of the story, they've been forced to grow into men.
Why Bakersfield, The Boys from Bakersfield?
I don't really necessarily have a good answer for that. I actually live in Michigan, and it's just where I wanted to start the story. And that city is close to Los Angeles, which in the story, Los Angeles is one of these major cities that the wealthy citizens are allowed to live in. And so this group wants to infiltrate that city and disrupt the government leaders there that are keeping them out. What separates my story from a lot of other stories, and what I was kind of going for, is realistic dialogue, realistic scenarios. I tried to make it that if a person's in this situation, what would they really say? What would they really do? You know, I think that a lot of times in entertainment, both in movies, television, and books also, there's a lot of cliches. There's a lot of, obvious endings and obvious scenarios. The guy gets the girl, the hero saves the day miraculously, and I think sometimes that's fitting, but what I was going for is kind of to keep the readers on the edge of their seats and not know what's going to happen next. And also, just to stay on a realistic path, that something that could actually happen in this scenario.
You were saying that you see a parallel between this story and what's going on right now in our own society.
It's really kind of something that a lot of people are thinking about right now in our country, which is the continuous growing gap between rich and poor. This is a futuristic novel, and it's kind of a worst-case scenario of what would happen if the gap continued to grow to the point where the majority of people just were left with nothing, and they decide to band together to stand up against the system and try to change things. So I think that that's a topic right now that is on a lot of people's minds, that there's this huge gap between rich and poor, and I think that my book does a good job of illustrating that.
All right, Mitch, I really think you've hit on something there. I mean, the big what if. It's like that movie Network. Remember that, Rob? Remember that movie? We're mad as hell and we're not going to take it anymore. That's what these boys from Bakersfield do. That's what it sounds like. Imagine, while we're imagining, the end of the world. Jackson Moorfoot does. In his book, it's called The War Outside. Now, Jackson, you call this Apocalypse Light. Exactly. What is that?
So many things written about end times and apocalyptic occurrences are super disastrous, which I believe they will be, but there will be some few individuals opposing the evil occurrences who are actually going to have a good time doing it. And so my story follows characters of different species in parallel paths toward a single outcome. So we have a series of characters that are human, a series of characters that are angelic, and we have characters that are alien. Like I said, are on parallel paths toward a single outcome that is the undermining of Antichrist's efforts on Earth and in space. And of course, included are the hardships and sacrifices that they have to endure in order to succeed. The two main characters are a young couple named Nessie and Eldan, and both are officers in the Navy of planet Spirdura, a planet roughly analogous to the Nibiru legends. And at this point in the saga, Spirdura is approaching intersection with our solar system. Nessie is a medical officer of their ship. Eldan commands the ground operations. I should note here that Nessie is an Earthling, but her husband Eldan is from the planet Spirdura. He also possesses some advanced physical powers that I imagine Adam and Eve likely had prior to the fall. Regeneration of limbs, rapid healing, speed, strength, increased intelligence. I'm an avid reader, and I discovered that there was just a dearth of dystopian writings that possessed what I would call a biblical worldview. What I found was that most futuristic tales, sci-fi, fantasy, whatever else, seem to be predicated on two what I consider to be false presuppositions, and that is that, number one, there is no biblical God, and number two, that the universe is random. And I found precious few stories available that espoused my worldview. And those that were available were just too thickly veiled and allegorical, more akin to swords and sorcery than to the spiritual and physical cross-dimensional reality that I believe we now live in. So eventually I just decided I had to write it myself.
What is the takeaway for the reader?
Regardless of the condition that they may find themselves in, if and when the actual biblical end times come upon us, that there is hope, and there are those who are fighting for them, and the outcome doesn't have to be dismal. The outcome can actually be positive and hopeful, something to look forward to.
So even at the end of the world, there is hope. This from an architectural ironworker in Chicago. This is Jackson's third published book, his first with Page, and he hopes one day he will be a writer full-time. The Penitents have long been considered a secretive cult, a Catholic order of men not accepted by the Vatican, and they were said to perform brutal rituals. The Penitent Brothers got started in the 18th century as Spanish missions in the Southwest declined. Well, this order is the focus of Shirley Giebel's book entitled Crucifixion. Now, Shirley, how did you become interested in this?
It's something that I came in contact with when I first went to New Mexico and was, curious about it because there were lots of things written about it. Throughout New Mexico, you see these kind of primitive crosses in little small villages you would go by and see a kind of meeting house and so forth. So I was curious about it. Stopped into a bookstore in House and tried to buy a book called The Passionists of the Southwest about the Holy Brotherhood in 1893. And the proprietress didn't want to sell it to me. And I was confused about that since she was a bookseller. And she said that it was negative about the Penitente Brotherhood. So curiosity was piqued. And so I began to ask questions of people, and they always seemed to act as if what I was saying was something they didn't understand. Then I made an acquaintance with someone who had run for the United States Senate from New Mexico and found out that, yes, indeed, it was a very active thought process and religious group that were just ordinary citizens in New Mexico, but they did have a lot of political power and so on and so forth. So it was a very real thing. But again, I could never find anybody to talk about it. I went to New Mexico doing final research for the book, and I decided to take a 6-mile walk and join the pilgrimage going into Chimayo, which is toward the end of Easter. It was a fascinating look, and for any reader, they can find this in the book, woven into the story. And anyway, I stopped at a small roadside restaurant, struck up a conversation with the woman and her husband that owned the restaurant, and I said something about the Penetantes, and she quite proudly said, "My whole family are Penetantes. My father, my grandfather, and beyond. And my brother at this moment is at the Morada in this small town nearby." And she offered to let me go there, which was quite unprecedented. So they said, "You may go." They took my license number, they described me, and said, "Absolutely no camera." So with my heart in my mouth, I must say, I went to visit this, and it gave me an entirely different viewpoint, because I could see then this very, very religious group, how they were really, really, really into the beliefs and were very devoted to what they were doing. So it is something that the reader will be able to find out when they read the book, what was inside the Morada. And it did give me a much more even-handed perspective to the beliefs and rituals as they play out in the novel.
This is pretty intense for your first novel.
Well, I guess it probably is. The novel has a rather complicated plot. I've been pleased that some of the people who have read it and commented have said that everything was tied up. This was kind of interesting because the original book, as I wrote it, was about 147,000 words. And someone in the publishing business said, "That ain't going to fly. You need to get it somewhere around 94 to 95,000. So as you may appreciate, when one goes in to pull the thread in a mystery story, you have to be very careful that at the end you haven't pulled something that doesn't get answered and satisfied. So there is a plot that has lots of moving parts to it. But the nice thing about the rewriting is that one suddenly realizes that all these wonderful things that you wanted to put in are kind of slowing the story down, and that once you start to do this, you get it so the story moves, and you want to turn the next page, and you want to find out what happened to this character or that character.
Well, I can tell you for a fact, good writing is rewriting. My mother, the English teacher, always told me that. And you certainly found that out as you tried to weave a mystery through this little-known religious cult still in existence. I give you a lot of credit, Shirley. That's a lot of work. All right, with that, we have got to take a quick break. The Educated and Poor, Overcoming MS, and a twisted love triangle on the rocks. That's what's coming up. You got to hear it to believe it. Do not, I beg you, do not go anywhere. This is the Page Publishing Book Club.
Have you written a book and want to get it published? Then now's the time to call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099 and do it immediately. You see, they're looking for authors of all types of books. And unlike most publishers, Page Publishing will take the time to review most of the books submitted to them. And they'll even give you their feedback. And if they like what they read, Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, the Apple iTunes Store, and other outlets. They'll handle everything: copyright protection, printing, cover art, publicity, and editing. So if you've written a novel, a children's book, a cookbook, inspirational work, a book of poetry, or biography, and want to get it published, then you need to call Page Publishing and do it immediately. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. Your road to fame and fortune could very well start with this simple phone call. For your free author submission kit, call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099.
Thanks for coming back to the Page Publishing Book Club. We love it so much when you come back. Makes us feel good, you know? Educated and poor. Two words you might think shouldn't be in the same sentence, but as Rachel Leonard asserts in her book entitled P, just P, they are two words that describe far too many people. Tell us your experience, Rachel.
I have a couple of degrees, but when I think about the state of poverty, I think about how much is coming in as far as income versus how much is leaving as far as expenses, and living paycheck to paycheck, and sometimes less than that is still a state of poverty, and I'm educated.
So it's as if being educated doesn't matter.
Like no different than when the phrase used to say that when you came to America, America would be free. Well, now It is graduating from college and having a degree. You should fit in a economic category that separates you from poor and poverty because you were educated. And I find that that is not the case, nor is the cause of poverty one issue. So the book will explore that also, that it's not one cause as far as like teenage pregnancies or veterans returning home that had graduated from high school, but, times have changed, technology changes every day, and so they have to go back to school, and they're suffering from poverty. So it's showing different aspects of poverty, the different causes of poverty, and then also it's breaking down that myth that says that when you have a higher education, you're somehow going to be better off, and that's not always the case.
So does your book offer any suggestions as to how we get ourselves out of this?
Actually, that is more of what's being explored in the sequel. What's going on in the first book is an eye-opener that poverty is not one culture. It's not one cause. So we can just get on one path in this book to understand that poverty comes from different areas for different reasons. Even when, a widow went from having 2 incomes in the house to no longer being able to live the way that they did when they lost their mate, that can cause poverty as well. So the book explores all these different causes of poverty and what it looks like America is actually doing to the poor. The setting takes place in Nowhere, which is a prison, and what it's doing is poverty is excluding the poor. And the poor will be with us always. It gives you an actual life experience for each character. So a glimpse of that book, like no one actually has a name, first of all. So I got rid of the blame of, I don't know, this might be a white person or this might be a Chinese person. And I gave them the names of the feelings and things that they were experiencing through poverty. So for instance, one of the characters' names was Sorrow, a woman that had a lot of children and a family, and things went bad on her journey, and so she was sentenced. They get sentenced to this prison of Nowhere because they live either below the line of poverty, or they're just simply poor and can't meet America's standards or expensive standards. So we have Sorrow, we have Deliverance in the book, we have Positive, who has 5 children, and she has multiple sclerosis, and she's educated. And then you have a few characters in the book that actually exist in Nowhere and have always wanted to be in Nowhere, because they feel like if they strive to go somewhere in life, it's ultimately going to fail before they begin. And so they would rather exist in Nowhere than to give an effort to try to come out of poverty.
All right, so let me get this straight. You illustrate poverty as a sentence in an imaginary prison where the names are the characters' feelings to illustrate how poverty does not discriminate. Very creative. By the way, Rachel has studied writing, philosophy, and Spanish. She hoped to go to law school, but was diagnosed with MS. And now she's hoping with this book that she can go back to her first love, writing. Now, as fate would have it, I interviewed another woman with MS on the same day as I interviewed Rachel. Sarah Louise Anderson has a very unique take on this devastating disease in her book entitled 15 Minutes. Sarah Louise, this is about how your family dealt with your initial diagnosis in the first, couple of years. Why is it written in the third person?
The reason it's written in third person is because when most people write a biography, they want to be focused on the person that the biography is written about. However, it doesn't tell you how that affects the other people in your life. And when you get diagnosed with a chronic illness, it affects you, your husband, your children. It affects your doctors. And that's what this book does. It puts everybody on the same level and shows how it affects those other people. I have been diagnosed, it'll be 26 years this December. And there are times in the book when I wanted to quit.
Why the title 15 Minutes?
If I told you that, people wouldn't have to read the book.
Okay. All right.
There is a formula, and there is a logical reason why it's called 15 minutes. And I will tell you this much. This successful secret was passed on to me shortly after I was diagnosed. And the MS Society connected me with a lady who, after being diagnosed, she had 3 small children. She was using a voice box, to talk, and her husband couldn't take watching her suffer, and he left her with these 3 children. She was already to the point when I talked to her that she was strapped into her wheelchair because she had no muscle control. And here she is helping new people that are being just diagnosed with MS, helping to encourage them. She's one of the strongest ladies I have had ever met in my life. I do not go to funerals. I went to her funeral. And bless her heart, it was not a funeral. It was really, truly a celebration of her life. And almost all the people that she had helped over the years were there. We shared our stories, and we all shared a secret of the 15 minutes.
Right.
What does that mean? You know, how do you apply that to your life? I've had a lot of people tell me that this book has changed their life, and it's helped a lot of people. That's my goal. My husband took me into a Walmart, and this is how the book opens. In my wheelchair, I had not been out in public. He stuck me in an aisle of yarn, and then he walked away. I could have killed him. I was angry. I was scared. And then I got ticked off. And it took me a while to learn to move my wheelchair on my own because I hadn't done it. After I went through all this and got my yarn, and I went over to the cash register, the lady at the cash register told me, that nasty man wouldn't let us help you. I realized at that point what my husband had done. I could do it. Otherwise, I'd have depended on him 100% from the very beginning. But he made me face the fact that, faced with this, as long as I didn't give up, I could do it. And that was the first time I realized you do not have to let the disease beat you. You have a choice. But you have to make that choice every day that you get up.
Man, you are some inspiration, Sarah Louise. I got to tell you, it's stories like this that really make me stop and think, is my life so bad? And how important it is that no matter what happens in your life, no matter what, you got to keep going every single day. And if people like Sarah Louise can do it, the rest of us can do it too. All right, we have time for one more, Robbie. All right. Braggy Marbe is standing by in warm, sunny San Diego with a tale right out of your favorite soap opera. I'm telling you, this is so crazy. I don't know how she came up with this one. Her book is entitled The Day I Met Myself.
It's about this lady named Candy. She's a neighbor of Pam and Jack. Pam and Jack moved in this neighborhood. And so Candy came and introduced herself, to Pam and Jack, and then she started dating Pam's husband. And the reason why she stopped dating Pam's husband is because she had just broke up with her boyfriend, and then she was pregnant, and she didn't want to raise her child without a father. So she started dating Jack, and then had Jack thinking that was his baby until his wife, Pam, decided that they need to take DNA because she kept getting pregnant and finding out that it was the guy that moved out, Tom's, it was his babies.
Okay, so this isn't true, right?
No, it's not true. Well, it probably is in some people's lives, but I didn't I didn't write the book pertaining to anybody. I just wrote the book because it came to, the thoughts kept coming to my mind, so I just wrote the book. I always wanted to write, but I didn't because I just didn't think I would accomplish in writing. But I always had, writing thoughts in my mind, and I always used to write out little things on paper. So I just decided that I'm going to try it, and I tried it, and I enjoy it. But the good thing about this book right here is that's not the ending to the book. I'm writing a second one. It's the closure of the first one. It's really based on everyday life because this happens to people for real. But it like I said, it's not pertaining to anybody. It's just based on, everyday life, the way people's lives really go.
Well, geez, I mean, she's married for 25 years. She has an affair with her neighbor, and then she gets pregnant.
Pam and Jack was married for 25 years. Candy was the mistress.
And then she became pregnant with the guy she was messing around with.
Not Jack, the guy that she was living with that moved out. He moved out from her because they couldn't get along. They used to fight about money. So he moved out from her. But when he moved out, she was pregnant. She knew she was pregnant, but the guy that moved out did not know she was pregnant. So she didn't want to raise the baby by herself, so she messed around with Jack thinking, wanting him to believe that was his baby.
Later, they find out that the kids belong to somebody named Tom.
Yes.
Who's Candy's ex-boyfriend.
Yes.
And then the married woman gets involved with a coworker named David.
Yes. And she became pregnant,
And
thinking
she
it was
got
David's
pregnant.
baby, but found out it was her husband's baby, yes.
So why is this called The Day I Met Myself?
Because Pam, she really found out who she was, because she had lost contact of who she was, because she was going through the thing about her husband was cheating. And then when she met David, David made her see how important she was as being a woman. So,
Okay, so she does end up finding herself, and there's a sequel coming
Yes.
to this.
Uh-huh.
Oh, man. You have quite the imagination, Braggy Marby.
I do, for real. I really do. I really do.
So you're glad you found
Yes,
writing.
I am, and I really enjoy it, and the stuff can just come in my mind just like that. But another thing that inspired me to write is I used to go to the library all the time and read Danielle Steele's books.
Okay.
Just all the time I would check out 3 or 4 books a week, and I just really enjoyed, her stories that she written. And I kept telling myself, I can do this, I can do this. So I just really attempted, and I really enjoyed doing it.
Well, you know what, Braggy? That's what matters. You really enjoy doing it. You just keep doing it, right? If you love it, do it. We have to be who we are in this world. I don't know where I heard that recently, whether it was a movie I was watching, but it really stuck with me. We got to be who we are. And if you love writing and you love, conjuring up these these relationships and these crazy love triangles and trysts, and go for it, Braggy. That's all I can say is go for it. Am I right, Rob? There you go. Be who you are. Write about what you want to write about. Feel the joy knowing you did what you wanted to do. And if you love the Page Publishing Book Club, and I know you do, my Page Publishing Book Club fans, come on back next week. Come on. What else are you doing? For another group of authors who will convince you. If they can do it, so can you. Same place, same time, right here. 710 WOR. Have a great weekend. See you February. Come on, Marge.